Hi, my name is Bailey Rosenstra from Information Technology, and for part two of assignment 12, we looked at the sentiment analysis, um, and we were given the task to analyze the sentiments within this restaurant review data. So to begin with, we learned how to create a heat map with the data that we were provided with the reviews. And using sentiment analysis, it created a kind of a ranking for each review. So I'd like to look at one review here to kind of show you an example. This review, this is a really fantastic Thai restaurant, which is definitely worth a visit, right? So the sentiment analysis determined that the positive factor was at 0.515 and the neutral components were at 0.485. So it is ranking the words within the sentence and then determining a compound value based upon those two values. So since there were no negative reviews or no negative wordage, the compound is very positive at 0.8173. So it will eventually determine this as a positive overall review. So I found this to be extremely intriguing. And then we wanted to develop this on a larger scale to talk about or to determine the overall accuracy of Orange and the program when it tries to cluster up the data, how accurate it is on clustering it correctly. So we once we created the clusters, once we created the clusters of the data, we clustered it by the rows. It looks to be like there are 5 clusters. A cluster from here, one. Cluster from here, two. A cluster from here, three. Cluster from here, four, and a cluster from here, 5. So overall, I'd like to talk about the colors real fast. The yellow is a positive color. So the yellow is in the compound means that these are likely to be positive reviews. The green is a neutral review, likely, if I could grab that one. Um, Nonetheless, the green is a neutral color. The blue is a negative color, and then, like I said, green, and then yeah. So blue is a negative color, and then so the blue is a negative color, the green is a neutral color, and yellow is a positive color. And then the compound reflects what it determined from the review. So I'd like to start with looking at the first cluster here. So that's about the start of the first cluster. And we can see that most of this compound is yellow. So I'd like to determine how accurate this actually is, and if these are positive reviews. So I went through and looked at each of these reviews and I counted them up, and it ended up being around, let's see here, I believe it was like 94% accurate. So if we went through all these reviews, the compound number is a positive number, so it should be correlated with a positive review value. So when we go through these, positive, positive, that one was a positive, negative. So there are roughly 13 of these that I determined just by going through these. Um, and so we can see that overall this cluster was uh, extremely accurate in its determination of the cluster the reviews are supposed to be in. So then we looked at the second cluster, and this one is overall positive, but kind of neutral. So this one might flip back and forth. And I did realize that most of these neutral ones became negative review values. So we can see here, this one alternating, like all the compounds are rated at in a positive nature, but half or just over half of the reviews were negative reviews determined by this value. So this one, once it started getting a little hairy down here, was not extremely accurate. Um, Probably because there were more neutral words, so it wasn't really sure which way to go, which that obviously makes sense. But We'll go over cluster three here. Cluster three was mostly negative compounds. So we should be seeing that these negative liked values are correlated with such. So we start with the first one, we keep going. This one I did determine that is probably the most accurate, other than the next category that we'll see. But we'll see that these negative values, this one was around 98% effectiveness or accuracy. We can see for all these negative values, they were negative like values. So that orange did very good with that cluster. Then this one, I'm not exactly sure why there were no positive. I think they were just more weird sayings that were hard for the program to determine. But we can see here all these were neutral values. It's kind of hard to distinguish these data points here because it seems kind of like a issue with the data determination. So then this final one, we can see that this one has a little bit more mix. So I would probably think for it to be more like this cluster 2, kind of just all over the place. And we look at this, and it is mostly blue, so you would like to see more negative reviews, and that is what we see. There are some positives in there that do not match up with their compound, but overall, that is at least 80% effectiveness and accuracy. So we can see that overall with these sentiment analysis that the program did an extremely good job. There is some margin of error, just like in the last part, but it is very minimal. So Orange did a significant job determining the data and clustering the data based upon the review values and using these sentiments to determine the review values. So this is part 2 of assignment 12. Thank you.